Hello, and welcome to Self-Care is Sexy. My name is Chris, and I'll be your host. We are a weekly podcast that's here to generate and share self-care ideas with each other. Last week, I talked about being overly helpful, gave you some tips on how to redirect that mostly toxic behavior, and what you can do for self-care if you found yourself being too helpful to others without getting your self-care first. If you missed that show or you want to check out any of our past episodes, you can listen via iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Podnet, and of course our website, www.selfcareissexy.com. Or really anywhere you get your podcast from, you can find Self-Care is Sexy. We're on a mission to help you put yourself first. I want to give you a quick preview of what to expect from today's show. For today's show, we're talking about the difference between self-care and being selfish. We're building off of last week's episode, giving you some tips on how to switch up your mindset around self-care that helps you to make self-care the priority. But first, we've got a few quick housekeeping notes. First of all, we got an awesome review in iTunes from Stephanie Oquedo in July. I hope I pronounced that right, Stephanie. She gave the show 5 stars and wrote, "This podcast is refreshing, unapologetic, tangible, and real. A must listen and a must share with all the women in your life. Let's stop feeling guilty for putting ourselves first and let's start embracing it. Self-care really is sexy." Thank you, Chris, for putting this podcast out into the world. And Stephanie, you are so very welcome. Thank you so very much. Your review is helping other folks just like you who might be grasping at whatever resources they can find on how to take care of themselves right now. So thank you so much for that review. And if you want a shout out, please make sure to hit up iTunes, search for the show, and tap to rate it on the stars. Let us know what you think. We always love hearing from you. Secondly, the show got some major love on the gram. Journally, a digital creator based in Orlando, Florida, wrote a post that said, "Hey loves, today is perfect for self-care. That's why I wanted to share with you Self-Care is Sexy. It's an amazing podcast that I've been listening to for a while and made me realize that the most important thing is to take care of ourselves and accept ourselves as we are. Because it's good always try to be better than we were. Understand that becoming a priority is not bad. The only way to love myself is to accept that I'm not perfect and still I can change the things that are not right in my life. If you like podcasts and self-care, this is the perfect podcast for you." And we just want to send you, thank you so much for that shout out on Instagram. We want to send you a soft, cozy, self-care, sexy t-shirt for taking the time and creating such amazing pictures of our show and posting it to your followers. So thank you so much. And again, friends, mentioning this show, it really helps us to know that we're not alone in trying to make self-care a priority. So whether you're using the hashtag or you're encouraging fellow friends to make self-care a priority, make sure you tell them about this incredible podcast. All right, let's get to today's show. If you are new to this podcast, hello and welcome. My name is Chris and I'll be your host. I first want to make sure that you know what you've signed up for today. Because you know what, folks? I am not everybody's cup of tea. And what I have to say and what I want to share, it might not be for you. And that's okay. I hope that you will still look for encouraging and positive podcasts because once you find your gem, right, the person or the show that really speaks to you in your language, it's like having a really good friend that's got your back, and you deserve that. You deserve to find that. But me, I curse, I'm loud, I have a lot to say, I laugh a lot at myself, and I'm sharing this podcast with you because I really want to push the agenda of giving you permission to put yourself first. And do not be fooled, my friends, this is an agenda. I have a clear agenda. I want to speak to people who are people pleasers, or the friends that are always doing for everyone around them, but not taking time to tend to their own needs and wants. This show is designed to help that mom out there who hasn't had a day away from her kids since this whole pandemic started. And, this show is here to help give her permission, to farm those kids out for a day and just take a self-care break from life. I want to help the struggling frontline workers who are holding us all up right now and not getting a pee break or skipping their meals in order to get more done for their patients. I want to help anyone who needs help putting themselves first. So if you are new to Self-Care is Sexy, that is what I'm all about with this show. And I want to talk today on a deeper level about feeling selfish when it comes to self-care. Okay, so I recently got this really long email that I'm not going to read on air because I haven't been able to gain permission. But the general question was, Chris, how do I know if I'm doing self-care or just being selfish? So, okay, loaded question, right? If you're a returning listener and you need your nugget of wisdom quickly so that you can move on and go be well in your day today, today's show answers that question with the biggest difference between being selfish and getting self-care is your intuition. And we're going to dive into that and other ways that you can tell the difference. But before we get into all that listiness that I got going on, I want to talk about this question, first of all, because there is a very specific mindset that asks this kind of question. And I think that we can all benefit from looking at this a little bit closer before we expand on how we're going to tell if we're being selfish versus taking care of ourselves and doing self-care. So when you ask, how do I know something, that type of question tells me that you're giving up your power. You're telling yourself that you don't know yourself, that you don't know yourself well enough to tell the difference between self-care and being selfish. You are literally saying that you don't know you. And truly, again, if you're new, that's really step one of self-care is that you have to get to know who you are. And that can be super uncomfortable, especially if you have a long history of a shitty relationship with yourself. If you had toxic self-talk, if you've beat yourself up to try and get yourself to be perfect at something, anything like that. It's like, what's it all mean to you? What do you really want out of this life? If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you try? You have to get to know who you are. And this question indicated to me that this person doesn't know themselves very well. Now, I really appreciate the giant ladyballs it took to email and ask this question, but let's work at the level of how we tell the story about ourselves. All right? And it's very important because thinking self-care is selfish, it means that you don't know the difference between self-care and selfish. And it's really a low-level negative thinking. It's one of those microaggressions against yourself that it's not clearly obvious. You're not punching yourself in the face and you're not calling yourself a stupid piece of shit. But it really is a negative underlining current of you don't know yourself. When you reach out and you ask somebody else, how am I going to know? Well, or how can I tell if these kinds of questions are coming up, you are low level reinforcing that you don't know. And when it comes to who you are and how you think and what you feel, you are the only priority. I can't give that wisdom to you. I can't tell you how you'll know. I can tell you the difference between self-care and being selfish so that you can spot it. But truly, only you are going to know what your internal intention is. Only you're going to know if you set the time aside to do the things that you want or take care of yourself, drink water, get sleep, have your favorite activity time, and tend to the priorities that you're pursuing. Only you're going to know what the intention is when you do these things. So for example, if you plan self-care with an intention, then you can never be selfish. If you say to yourself, I'm exhausted and I need to get extra sleep, so I'm going to bed early tonight. And then something comes up, somebody needs you, some kind of tragedy, disaster, whatever. If you say no to whatever comes up because you chose your bedtime first, that is not being selfish. Even if helping that other person and foregoing your bedtime means that you're doing a good thing. You following me here? I know it's this tricky, sticky masquerade thing that's happening where it's like, oh, we feel like we're being really good people when we're helping others, but if we forego the self-care in order to do that, we're actually being more selfish. And I'll get into that in a minute. But if you don't schedule self-care, if you commit to a bunch of stuff that you can't do and then you're constantly bailing on it, that's being selfish. Do you see the difference? Other people don't know your boundaries, friends. You have to train them. You have to tell them what the boundary is, and you have to establish it. Because when people come to you, it feels good to be counted on, and it feels good to be the hero. But like last week's show, we talked about being too helpful and how that can really hinder you. It can also harm the other person as well. And so the real difference between being selfish and self-care is that intention. If your intention is to heal or repair yourself or learn to love yourself and open up to this different way of thinking about ourselves, then this question is really seeking to understand. But what it feels like, and in context of the email, most of us are thinking we're broken, oh, we've done it again, and we just default to putting ourselves down. So when we're trying to ask this question, how do I know if I'm being selfish versus I'm getting my self-care, it really comes down to how we make decisions for ourselves. And that's a skill that you really want to cultivate. The actual decision-making process and how you switch your mentality from hating yourself and questioning what's wrong with you to really believing, like not just thinking, but really knowing that you're good enough. You do enough and you are enough. And it's okay to make decisions based on what you want to do. Now, this goes back to overcommitting, right? Wanting to help. Finding your value in helping others. When you stand at a crossroad of decision, the first thought should always be, how would I feel if I chose option A? And how would I feel if I chose option B? That's when you know your decision making and your intentions are aligned, that when you do things for yourself, you are doing self-care and not being selfish. And again, we're talking about this question of how do I know if it's self-care or I'm being selfish? I really feel like the better question to ask is, what's the difference? Where's that line? And again, like I said at the top of the segment, it's all about intention. Did you plan to do something good for yourself? Are you making time in the day for yourself? Are you aware of your boundaries, and are you managing you and your well-being? That's your responsibility. So let's go through this real quick. I'm going to talk about the three major differences between being selfish and self-care. Now, number one, the biggest difference is that self-care is answering the question of what I need, and being selfish answers the question of what I want. Okay? And your needs, like food, water, shelter, clothing, love, certainty, uncertainty, all those things, all of those needs are not selfish. If you need sleep because you were up with the baby all night, asking someone to watch your kid is not selfish. Or plopping them in front of the TV or on their iPads is not selfish. But we have to work at allowing ourselves to take what we need. And when we're being selfish and that answers the question, what do I want? When we think about what we want, even if it's something really small, like what do I want to eat or drink, or what I'd rather be doing with my time right now, you have to make sure that answering that question has space between figuring out what you want and then the implementation of getting what you want.